Chicago Bears rookie minicamp is this weekend, and a few different undrafted rookie free agents and tryout players have a real shot to make this 53-man roster at training camp.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, we look at this undrafted rookie free agent class of the Chicago Bears, officially announced on Thursday as they prepare for rookie minicamp this weekend, and some names that we knew about, some names added as tryout players, a couple of veterans brought in on a tryout as well, and we'll look at which guys have the best shot to make the 53-man roster, either because they are a really impressive rookie that probably shouldn't have gone undrafted, and B, they have an opportunity on this Bears depth chart where maybe there's not a lot of proven talent at their position, and if they have a strong rookie minicamp and lead that into OTAs and training camp, that they maybe could sneak their way onto the 53-man roster. It seems like just about every year there's one undrafted player who we fall in love with and feel like, oh man, he's the next gem to be found. Last year, Tyson Bagent obviously making the team and emerging as the number 2 quarterback. Maybe there's another one of those in this draft class. At least a few of these guys will end up on the practice squad at the very least. And there is another candidate to be this year's Tyson Bagent, and that's quarterback Austin Reed from Western Kentucky. He was one of 9 undrafted free agents that the Bears announced as being signed at the start of rookie minicamp, along with running back Ian Wheeler, wide receiver Peter LeBlanc, tight end Brendan Bates, offensive lineman Theo Benedett, defensive end Jamry Chroma, defensive tackle Keith Randolph Jr., linebacker Carl Jones Jr., and cornerback Reddy Stewart. But Reed in particular gets Tyson Bagent comparisons, not purely exactly because the skill sets are one-to-one, but because of sort of the type of quarterback that they were. Extremely productive at the college level and generally smart passers, guys who you feel like can catch on at the NFL level quickly with some of their football IQ and some of their physical ability that you can't expect Austin Reed to just be as good as Tyson Bagent. Players that come into the league and play as well as Bagent did as undrafted free agent quarterbacks are extremely rare. But Reed has some of those types of qualities that you might look for in a quarterback who could be successful as an undrafted free agent. Not that he's going to unseat Bagent as the Bears' number 2 quarterback, but to compete for that number 3 spot, kind of like Bagent was initially last season. Right now it's what Brett Ripien is the number 3 quarterback on the Bears depth chart, not anyone who's guaranteed anything or any kind of spot on this 53-man roster. But Reed was one of the most productive quarterbacks in college football at Western Kentucky, not a SEC powerhouse school or anything like that, but clearly successful, right? Moves the ball through the air and has a lot of snaps under his belt. He's seen a lot from opposing defenses. You're not going to throw a lot at him that he hasn't experienced before. But unlike Tyson Bagent, he's got a pretty live arm, high velocity on his throws. He's not like the world's best deep ball thrower, but like tight windows, right? Threading the needle over the middle of the field, fitting it into tight spaces and being confident and aggressive to do so. And I think some of that confidence comes with all of the snaps and throws he's had in his career to kind of know what he's looking for there. He also has enough of the ability to, enough of that velocity to make off-platform throws, to throw from funny arm angles and still be able to fire the ball in there, right? He's not quite, I think we think of Tyson Bagent as having, limited velocity and limited arm strength in that regard, but Austin Reed is not that. Sometimes as a result of that confidence and that aggressiveness, he can kind of rush his processes and try and fire a ball in there and not have taken that extra half a second to kind of check on where another defender might be that he hadn't paid attention to yet. So I think there's a certain level of making sure he fine-tunes his coverage recognition from pre-snap to post-snap and understand, like, okay, like there's sometimes he reads it pre-snap and then turns and is ready to fire that ball in there and didn't notice that maybe they weren't in the exact zone that he thought they were, or that maybe a couple players exchanged responsibilities on a zone that you wouldn't normally expect them to. And if you just take that extra half a hitch or something in your drop back, like you might be able to see that and still fire it in, but not at the exact same placement to prevent putting the ball in harm's way occasionally that way. Like he's still generally accurate and generally makes good decisions, but sometimes fired it in there when he shouldn't have there. There were also, I thought, looking through his tape a little bit, some occasional footwork issues, I guess, where especially sometimes over the middle of the field, he would let passes sail on him a little bit because he's not really getting the pass down when he transfers the weight from the back foot to the front foot there. Like he's got generally good pocket presence and footwork in that regard in terms of, maneuvering the pocket and avoiding pressure and feeling that. But in terms of like consistent delivery of the ball, they're just sometimes there when he just needs to shore that up a little bit and make sure that he's not, again, like rushing that process either. Because there's sometimes I think he sees it and he wants to get the ball in there, but it's just like, take that half a beat, set up properly, see it properly, fire in. The guy's still going to be open. You're still going to be able to get the ball in because your velocity, but just give it a little bit of extra time. So like, that's where I think Reed has a lot to offer, that he can come in right away and be impressive right away and push for a 53-man roster spot as that number 3 quarterback in that Nathan Peterman role that we saw occupied last year. Like Reed can easily be just as good or better than Brett Ripien at this point, and it comes down to whether the Bears want to keep 3 quarterbacks or not. One other name I'll throw in on offense here before we cut to a couple of bigger name guys on defense, but just because of the opportunity, the tight end Brendan Bates out of Kentucky. He is not purely, but in college he was purely a blocking tight end. This past season, he had 4 catches. They threw the ball his way 6 times all season. I think over the course of his 4 years, he caught like 26 passes. This is not a high volume receiver, but he's 6'4", 245 pounds, and ran a 4.66 40-yard dash with a 10-foot 2-inch broad jump. Like he is a good athlete at the tight end spot and a pretty reliable blocker. And he looks to me like a guy who, if you throw the ball to him more, I think he could do more. He's never going to become, Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce at the tight end position. No, but like, I think there's a little bit more upside than just blocker there. And the Bears right now at tight end do not have much depth behind Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett. Like the only other tight end under contract right now is Steven Carlson, who was an undrafted free agent last year and spent the year on the practice squad. Like not anybody who's going to be guaranteed anything or really, hold off someone like Brendan Bates. Like if Brendan Bates comes in and plays well, he absolutely has a path to 53. Like the Bears are most likely going to keep 3 tight ends here. And so at this point, it's either Steven Carlson or Brendan Bates. And like Carlson isn't owed anything there. So if Bates can really play well and step into that, like there's absolutely a pathway for him to get to the 53, unless they go out and add another tight end at some other point in this process. But there aren't any veteran tight ends trying out at training camp right now. So we'll keep close tabs on that too. We know that Shane Waldron likes to use multiple tight end sets. The Bears are going to need tight end depth. And if Brendan Bates can prove himself as a blocker and a special teams guy, that's absolutely his way to this 53-man roster as a rookie who had 4 catches his last year at Kentucky. Like that would be a pretty cool story if he made the 53. And I do feel like there is some upside there, even if maybe that starts out with a year on the practice squad like Steven Carlson did last year. I think the bigger names that a lot of Bears fans have already latched onto in terms of undrafted free agents come on the defensive line, where there are 2 decent prospects there that the Bears signed as undrafted free agents and a big opportunity to earn some playing time at that position. So we'll get to know Keith Randolph Jr. and Jamari Croma next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Yahoo Finance. Yahoo Finance is here to help you get all of your financial information all in one place. If there's one thing I pay attention to just as much as football, it is my finances. And Yahoo Finances is a great source to stay up to date on all the information you need. When all the talk about this idea of recession or an inflation and stagflation and whether or not it sounds like a recession's probably not going to happen, and then inflation is evening out. But the best way to stay on top of all that is with Yahoo Finance. Plus, they have stock advice and credit card information and everything you need to manage every single aspect of your finances. The great thing is you can also link your brokerage accounts to get a unified view of your wealth, including your 401k and other investments. That real comprehensive perspective is what can set apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. So, for this comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, exhaust kits, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. There's a great opportunity for any defensive lineman that makes it to Chicago Bears training camp to earn their way onto the 53-man roster. And that includes two of the names that, or the two names, I should say, that the Bears brought in as undrafted free agents here. We'll start with the defensive tackle, Keith Randolph Jr. from Illinois. Among the Bears' undrafted free agents, he was the player rated the highest on NFL draft boards, a player that was expected to be drafted as early as maybe even the 6th round, but falls through undrafted, and the Bears were able to bring in a kid from the local institution down the road, which, by the way, I should mention, Keith Randolph Jr. from Illinois. We just launched Locked On Illini here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So for all of you fans of the collegiate blue and orange, go check out Locked On Illini with our new host over there who's getting things rolling and doing a great job there. But Keith Randolph Jr., who I'm sure they'll talk about on Locked On Illini, he's a player who definitely has high motor, high energy, violence, physicality, likes to play football, and is that kind of human being, the kind of player underneath the helmet that the Bears really like in terms of guys who just love the game and love to get after it, but definitely limited, from a athletic tools standpoint. Not the most explosive, not the fastest coming down the line of scrimmage. He's strong, and he's got good size. He's like 296 pounds. Played the 3 technique pass rusher spot for them, but I think you could realistically see him at either nose tackler or 3 tech and probably alternate him between the both. But, just a little stiff, not super fluid, not amazingly explosive. There's definitely a physical ceiling there that I think limits how great of an NFL player he's going to be. But I think he's really consistent, especially in the running game. And I feel like given his ability to kind of lock out and get some penetration that way, I think there's a high floor for him, right? This is a player to me who feels like he can carve out a little bit of an NFL career for himself. He's never going to be your premier pass rusher on the interior, right? He's never going to be the 10-sack guy from the defensive tackle position. He might not ever be a starting player in the NFL, but he feels to me like the guy who could bounce around the league for 10 seasons because he's just really reliable as a rotational backup in there. This is not necessarily a skill set comparison here, but I think of somebody like Mike Pennell, who the Bears signed last year, 2022, as a backup guy. He's been a backup for the Packers and the Jets and the Chiefs and the Falcons, and was back on the Chiefs this year, where he's never been a starter in the NFL, but he's played 13 years in the league or something, or at least 10 years in the league, 10 or 11, 12 years in the league, as just a guy who you can't keep off your team because he gives you good snaps off the bench. He's never been a high sack guy, but he just is consistent enough. And I wonder if Keith Randolph could put together a career like that. Maybe that doesn't mean right away, year one, he makes the 53, but maybe that's a season on the practice squad to adjust. But you look at the defensive tackle spot on this Bears depth chart, and there's certainly room for him, right? You've got Gervon Dexter and Andrew Billings are going to be your starters. You've got Zach Pickens as kind of your top backup there, and then it's anybody's ball game. They signed Byron Cowart and Michael Dwumafor this offseason, two guys who have not been consistently playing on NFL rosters every year. Like Keith Randolph could, I don't want to say easily, but like has a pretty clear path to being the fourth defensive tackle on this roster, the direct backup to Gervon Dexter. I mean, I'd prefer to have more experience at that position, and I wonder if the Bears might still pursue a free agent in some capacity there, but there's absolutely an ability for someone who seems to have a high floor like Keith Randolph to step right in and be an NFL caliber player right away, and maybe never to become a starter, but just be a solid backup for you. It gives you 20 snaps a game, and you feel like can hold up in the running game and occasionally make a play in the passing game. Sure. For an undrafted free agent, that'd be a great career. Like that's absolutely everything you would ask for from someone like Keith Randolph. Whereas the other defensive lineman they signed, Jamari Croma from James Madison University, and for those watching on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, I'm wearing my home field apparel James Madison Dukes shirt. They had a random shirt sale once where they'd send you a totally random shirt for like $20, and so this was the one that arrived. So I'm not even really a James Madison fan. I just like the shirt because I bought it. But anyway, this is my James Madison shirt to rep, I guess, Jamari Croma, who has had a lot of fans, I think, of people watching the Bears undrafted free agent class, because this is much more, unlike Keith Randolph, Croma is much more the raw athlete at the defensive line position who is going to need some tweaking a little bit, I think, but has some of those physical tools that get you really excited. It depends on what position you project him as, because at James Madison, he played up and down the defensive line. Basically anything but nose tackle. He lined up over the guard, over the tackle, outside the tackle, anywhere in between. He was that guy. So at like, what is he, 6'3.5", 275 pounds. He's a little small to be a defensive tackle and a little big to be a defensive end right now. And so there's kind of this question of like, do you have him maybe slim down a tiny bit and stay a little bit more explosive to be an edge rusher? Or do you have him bulk up a little bit and he's already a pretty good athlete for a defensive tackle and hope that he could be an interior pass rusher? It sounds like the Bears are going to try him on the edge first, but maybe they're open to multiple options here. But he certainly scored well in terms of like the pro day numbers, a 4.77 40-yard dash, a 7.34 3-cone was pretty good. A 10-foot broad jump was among the better players at his position. And particularly his 10-yard split was 1.8 seconds. Like he is pretty darn explosive based on the numbers, and also I think some of what we saw from his tape at James Madison. And he also, not just a pure pass rush guy either, definitely some pretty good chops in the running game as well, able to kind of hold his ground pretty consistently there and not, he's not always in the backfield making the big tackle for loss, but just holding the edge, making the running back cut back inside, or at least if he's on the backside, kind of preventing the cut back to his area. Does his job in the running game well enough, even if he's not necessarily dominant in that area. So to me, it feels like when you got a little bit of an athlete like this coming from a really small school, that practice squad year one makes a lot of sense for someone like Croma. But again, you look at the defensive line depth chart and it's like, okay, you've got Montez Sweat and DeMarcus Walker are your starters. You just drafted Austin Booker in the 5th round, so those 3 are guaranteed. And then you've got like Dominique Robinson and Jake Martin are kind of competing for the 4th and 5th spot. You've got Khalid Kareem, who they claimed on waivers last year, but like Croma could easily come in and compete with Jake Martin, Dominique Robinson, and Khalid Kareem for that 4th or 5th defensive end spot, depending on how many the Bears keep. Now, most likely, he's going to be behind all those guys for most of training camp, but still, the upside is there to keep him around on the practice squad, and the opportunity is there that none of those guys are guaranteed anything. If Croma is just like ready to go and adjust to the NFL level super quickly, like definitely someone we want to keep an eye on here through training camp to see how that adjustment goes, because it is a big ask to go from James Madison to the NFL, but we've seen players like Tyson Bagent go from small school to successful very, very quickly. One other name I'll throw out real quick before we move on. The cornerback Reddy Stewart from Troy is interesting to me. He's only 5'10", 185, so might be a slot guy in the NFL, but like really good ball skills. Ton of interceptions and pass breakups throughout his career. Had a really, really strong 2022 season, was borderline dominant at Troy. Took a big step back in 2023, goes undrafted. Also a very limited athlete. I think he's got some pretty good short area speed, but not a long speed guy. I mean, you wouldn't want him covering Tyreek Hill. I mean, in general, but like people with that kind of speed, I don't know if he can keep up with Rome Odunze vertically in a foot race there, but like Stewart is smart. He's good at the tape study. He's got ball skills, like I said, some special teams upside as well. And he's someone the Bears met with at the Hula Bowl, and had him kind of work through some plays and stuff on the whiteboard with them to try and see his football IQ. So someone the Bears that have had an eye on for a long time. I don't think Reddy Stewart is going to make the 53 because the cornerback spot is pretty jam-packed with talent there, but just a name to keep an eye on. It wouldn't surprise me if he makes some plays, but maybe the upside is a little bit more limited there and isn't ready for a 53-man roster spot just yet. Let's not forget the opportunity for veterans to still make this team, and there are 3 veteran players at rookie minicamp that are there on a tryout basis, guys who have been in the NFL for a handful of seasons and are trying to show the Bears what they can do. And that certainly gives them a leg up on any of the other tryout players. So we'll get to know the 3 veterans coming in at cornerback, wide receiver, and tight end next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that can help you be your best self and feel your healthiest. Going to online therapy is a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen. I do it every single week, and that's why I cannot recommend BetterHelp enough, because it really helps you get at what is most important to you and live life to the fullest. I like to say that going to therapy is kind of like going to the gym, but for my brain. I go to the gym because I want my body to be healthy and strong, not because it's broken and I'm trying to fix it, but just because I want it to be its best. And I go to therapy not because my brain is totally broken, but because I want my brain and my thoughts and my thinking to be healthy and strong and be their best. And that's where BetterHelp can make all the difference. Therapy can be different for everyone. And I know most of us have problems that are bigger than just our favorite sports team. So it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you've been thinking about giving therapy a try, check out BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited right to your schedule. So visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We talked about the undrafted free agents who are already signed to the Bears roster, and I mean, barring getting cut, like they'll be there at training camp. But there are a few guys who are just trying out. There's a bunch of rookies trying out, but a few veterans that are trying out that they're not under contract yet. They're just there to work out and show the Bears what they can do. But I think all 3 of them have a real shot to, at the very least, get a contract coming out of this weekend and also potentially compete for the 53-man roster for some of the same reasons we talked about with some of the other guys. So 3 veteran players that have been around the NFL before at training camp. Perry Nickerson, a cornerback, played for the Dolphins last season, has been on a few different teams. Wide receiver Freddie Swaim, who has played for the Seattle Seahawks. More on that in a little bit here. And then a tight end, Tommy Sweeney, who I think was with the Giants most recently, but with the Buffalo Bills before that, if I remember correctly. All 3 of these guys, I think, have a shot on this roster, the 90-man roster after rookie minicamp, and maybe, just maybe, the 53-man roster. Let's start with Freddie Swaim, the wide receiver, because there's an obvious connection here with the Bears coaching staff. Freddie Swaim was on the Seahawks in 2020 and 2021, I think maybe even 2022, but at his peak, he was their number 3 wide receiver in 2021 with Shane Waldron as his offensive coordinator. That was the last year of Russell Wilson there. Like, obviously having DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the outside made Freddie Swaim's job in the slot a lot easier, but this is also a player coming out of Florida that is a really good athlete. You know, he's like 6 foot, 200 pounds, but ran like a 4.3, 340 or something like that. Like really fast in the 40-yard dash. Like has pretty good height, pretty good weight, really good speed, physical tools there for sure. Haven't seen that translate into as much playmaking in the NFL. You know, he's just not consistent enough. I don't think he's a great separator. And then even after the catch, like he's an athlete, but like isn't as slippery as you might like. Like just hasn't been able to really like make those kind of plays consistently to earn playing time ever since. But familiarity with the offense, familiarity with the coaching staff, and some production previously in his career certainly gives him a clean shot to at least get a contract, if not push for a 53-man roster spot. Because like your wide receiver depth after your big 3 is pretty open-ended, right? Of course, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, 1, 2, 3, boom. Tyler Scott's 4, and then it's Velus Jones, Dante Pettis, Simba Webster. You know, these are not necessarily players that are scaring off. You know, if I'm Freddie Swaim, I'm looking at that saying, man, I could be the number 5 receiver on this team. I could beat out any of those guys. A lot of that's going to come down to special teams, which Swaim played some of with the Seattle Seahawks, and he hasn't been able to stick on a roster the last season and a half or so. I think it was on the Dolphins practice squad or something this past season. I can't remember exactly where he ended up, but like he's got an uphill battle, but that familiarity should go a long way for him getting a potential shot here. Also on the offense, the tight end, Tommy Sweeney. Much like the undrafted free agent we talked about earlier, Brendan Bates, this is also blocking tight end. Not a guy who gets a lot of passes thrown his way, not much of a receiver, not a great athlete at all, but definitely a consistent run blocker and someone who, you throw it to him on a check down, he'll catch it. But like for me, it's the same thing we talked about with Bates. The Bears need to keep a number 3 tight end somewhere on this roster, and whether it's Steven Carlson, Brendan Bates, or Tommy Sweeney, like one of those guys would have to get it. So like, why not him? Like he's the one of the 3 that's played NFL games before, has been in NFL offenses before, has proven himself as an NFL blocker before with some NFL special teams experience, because that's also going to be a part of who makes the number 3 spot on the 53-man roster, is who's going to be able to contribute on special teams. I think Sweeney's blocking ability gives him a shot there, but I wouldn't expect him to be someone who plays a lot of snaps, even if he does make the team, because that's just not been the role that he's in. And again, he's not even under contract yet, so I'm not getting ahead of myself with Sweeney here, but I think he's got good of opportunity as anybody to try and make some noise on this team. And then finally, the cornerback, Perry Nickerson. He's been around the league a little bit. He's played some games before. A guy who is primarily a slot cornerback, but can play on the outside. He's a little bit smaller, but another guy with great speed at the position. Another 4.3 type speed athlete here. But now he's 29. He's probably not the same kind of youth. Probably not as fast as 29 is not going to be slowing down much, but he's not training for a 40-yard dash, but still good athlete, and made it on the Miami Dolphins team last season when Jalen Ramsey was hurt. He kind of filled in their lineup there, played some legit snaps for them. So this is not some guy who's just been out of the league for a couple seasons and not playing, but he has been a guy who has struggled to consistently stay on 53-man rosters. So there's certainly an inconsistency that I think has come with his game. I think he's a little bit undersized, and so misses some tackles in there, maybe isn't quite the kind of, but he's slot cornerback, right? You're not expecting these guys to be the dominant physical guys up on the line of scrimmage per se. They expect you to be, the fluid athlete who can keep up with shifty slot receivers. The problem for him, much like we hinted at with Reddy Stewart at cornerback, it's where's his shot at the 53? You've got Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson on the outside, Kyler Gordon in the slot, and then Terrell Smith is definitely your number 4 corner. So then it's okay, number 5, you've got Greg Stroman, you've got Jalen Jones, you've got Blackwell from last year, Josh Blackwell back. If anything, I think it's Blackwell's spot that Perry Nickerson is probably coming for, that backup slot role / special teams ace type. And Jalen Jones is in that conversation too, where it's those guys are younger and less experienced than Perry Nickerson, but they've been here, they've been around, this coaching staff knows them, and they're younger, and they just have more upside ahead of them. So it's not to say that Nickerson has no shot, but I'm not here to feel like he's a guy who's going to make some waves here necessarily, but it's worth a shot to just keep checking on slot cornerback depth, because we've seen Blackwell get hurt in recent seasons. We've seen injuries across the board at cornerback. You need to have other names available on your short list, and he's certainly an option there, as is Reddy Stewart, the undrafted free agent from Troy. But those are the veteran tryout players those are all the veteran tryout players, and all 3 of them have some intrigue to them. They're not just nobodies who have bounced around the league and don't really have any much experience to talk about. No, these are guys who have played legit NFL snaps on the field in the regular season, and that gives them a leg up over any of the other rookies competing for some of those spots. We'll see what comes out of Bears rookie minicamp. Any and all important updates we get, you can be sure we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. If you're looking for your second listen after making Locked On Bears your first listen today, check out our Locked On Sports Today 24/7 sports streaming channel. It's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming and argument television you get on ESPN and Fox Sports nowadays. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming back for another episode of Locked On Bears next week. We'll get this Bears schedule next week and go through all of that. We'll keep updates on rookie minicamp, and OTAs are right around the corner, so we're not going anywhere just because we are in the offseason. And we'll make sure that every single day we give you another opportunity to bear down.